everybody, we're mic'd up. Everybody hears me good. Tech stuff.
You do fine in the front row, but you're not coming across on the stage.
I worry about the camera angles. I need another. This one's not on, right? Okay. All right, we're getting it on, guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. All right, everyone. Welcome to the American Priority 2018 conference. Our honored guests, of course, are here. This is your first interview.
That's right.
Afterwards, outside of the gates, and you made it through, and you're here with and you made it through with your wife.
I did.
You made it through with your wife. So we're going to do this a little bit differently. I know a lot of people in the back in the mainstream media probably have questions. So if they have anything they want to ask and write it on a piece of paper, they can hand it to Tom. And because George and I, we spoke, and nothing's really off limits, right? Whatever people want to talk about, he's here to talk about. I'm Mike Cernovich. We just showed our film last night, Thursday. I first heard about George's story from Twitter. That's where I know most people from Twitter. If I don't read your Twitter, I don't know that it happens. And the cell phones are off. And we're here to have an open, freewheeling conversation about what happened and how you got here. So before we get into the really deep stuff, how does it feel now you're back?
Well, it's an honor to have the American Priority Conference host me. I feel at home here. I feel I'm with family here. And I've just been welcomed with open arms, and for me that means the world to me. Because while I wasn't in prison for that long, it's still not a place anybody wants to spend even 1 minute in, let alone 12 or 14 days, whatever I was in there. You're away from family, you're away from friends, you're away from the world, and you're living in a underworld, and I never thought in my life that it would have happened to me. I didn't think it happened to people working on presidential campaigns or, transition teams like I was, and just really doing their best to help their country and not ever looking to harm their country like I never did. So I met interesting people. I saw it as an experience, and a good experience. And I'll get into that later.
Okay, well, yeah, let's talk about that, because I saw in your Twitter, you tweeted out a picture of him going in, and I found it interesting. It's just so many layers where that's sort of the new way of communicating with the outside world. Like, this is what it's like. This is behind the scenes. So how did you feel when you took that picture? What was going through your heart?
First, thanks a lot for inviting me. It's truly an honor to be here. To me, I felt defeated in this moment, because I've been all the way along with George since he pled guilty first until I walked him in this prison camp in Wisconsin. And my story is a story of loyalty and support. I gave him a voice when he didn't have a voice. And I knew behind the scenes the unfairness of being true. So I tried to share this dramatic moment in which I saw him walking there head high, like he is, always fierce. I found something heroic about him walking there, because I've been very vocal about my understanding of his situation. He has been victim of a setup. The campaign of the president has been infiltrated through George. And I've been not only his wife and his support, but also witness in the case, because I know and I worked with Professor Mifsud in Europe shortly, because he was a shady figure. I made it clear, both with the FBI and the Congress, that this person has ties to Western intelligence. So I was in this specific position in which I married George in the middle of the investigation, and I knew Mifsud's background. I had to stand by my man. And that picture you have seen, it was the end of this path, in which dramatically I felt defeated, because I fought so much for this not to happen.
Well, you said two things that I don't want to push too many boundaries or go anywhere appropriate, but did you say it felt erotic? Did I hear that correctly?
No.
Or exotic?
Dramatic.
Dramatic, okay, yeah. Okay. I wanted to clear that up, yeah.
No.
We're in very dangerous times. I was like, okay, let's just clear the record up here, get that out of there.
Some women like the tough guy image, Mike.
Well,
Actually,
Hey, man, I don't judge anybody. Everybody's a
But you read my mind because I was attracted by this adventure, and so
well,
there
he
is
didn't
something
break.
like
No,
sexual
yeah,
talent.
but so I'm like, okay, do I ask her about that? Did I hear it incorrectly? So dramatic.
You're reading my mind.
Yeah, you know, he's got a good look to it. So, but you in the moment you felt defeated.
Defeated,
Defeated,
yes.
yeah.
Because I knew that he didn't deserve in any way to end up in this place. I know this is a completely fabrication because I know Mifsud and I know George. And if there is somebody farther from the Russian collusions fantasy is George. They end up even creating the fantasy, I'm a Russian agent. So I say like, this is my husband, I'm the spy who loved him.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on to the point of absurdity, which is I go to the Russian-Turkish bathhouse on East 10th Street in New York. So I always take a selfie. I'm colluding with the Russians.
Well, do you like Russian food? Because if you're spotted at a Russia house,
yeah,
here.
Well, I like the platza. I like when they beat you up with platza, and yeah. But there really is a rare kind of a weird xenophobia in a way where we're always told, oh, xenophobia is bad, but like, oh, Russians, now we're supposed to be afraid of Russians is actually quite bizarre. But what interests me about this whole drama, though, is I don't think most people, you read it in the headlines, but you don't really know. It says, 2 agents, they came over, they interviewed you, everything's just cozy. But what's that really like when you hear the door? Did you get the big, loud cop knock at the door?
No, I got a phone call as I'm out of the shower and shaving. And the same night, well, the same day that they came to my house, I actually was going to be talking with joining the administration with certain contacts I had. And so it was a very awkward moment. You know, I get a random call at 9 in the morning. I'm shaving. I'm half naked in my shower. And, oh, this is the FBI. We're outside your house. And I say, with the FBI outside my house? What did I do? Okay, that's no issue. They come in my house. And they just basically start telling me, like they probably tell everyone, that you're going to help national security. Mm-hmm. You're a very important person that we need to talk with. And you're a patriot for coming to help us. And I do love my country. You know, I have a different view of the federal government now than I did probably a year and a half ago when I was maybe a little younger, more naive, whatever you want to call it. But I went in, you know, I put my suit on to match them because I thought it'd be a professional type of encounter with 2 federal agents. And basically, I get there, and there's the excuse that they used to talk to me was a friend of mine in New York, who, in my mind, the person was not a friend, but it was a person who had reached out to me, Sergey Millian. Mm-hmm. And Sergey Millian, I guess he's part of the Steele dossier or a source of the Steele dossier. And, you know, he was trying to set me up in various ways as well. And I could get into that later. But so anyway, I get there, and within 5 or 6 minutes of showing me a picture of Sergey, they say, we're not here to talk about him. And I said, oh. And then 2 weeks ago, the 2 weeks before that, I remember one of his associates telling me that he was working for the FBI. So things, my mind was, you know, was spinning. And we just go off onto various topics, you know, about my ties to Israel, which was about 80% of the conversation. If I was being cultivated by Israeli government officials, why I knew people in Israel, why I knew people in the Middle East. Because actually that's what my professional background was. Mm-hmm. I have nothing to do with Russia. And that's why it's so bizarre that I fit into this character of as I guess the epicenter of a Russia conspiracy when I've never traveled to Russia. I've never knowingly met a Russian official in my life, and I don't speak Russian. But I've dealt in the Middle East a lot and in Europe. So it was very confusing. And then they bring up, did you ever hear anything about emails? And I said, from a Russian government source. And I basically tell them no, but a Maltese man, and this is public record now, told me X, Y, and Z, that the Russians have thousands of Hillary Clinton's emails. Now, at that moment, I thought I was telling the FBI that there was this strange man who had this information, might have been working on behalf of Russia, and you should certainly look into him, just like any patriotic American should do. Even, And later on, we find out from this man's own lawyer, my wife, then girlfriend, who knows him, explains that he was never working for Russia. He was working with Western intelligence and probably the CIA, the FBI, and others. So my entire case essentially is built on this professor who the government tried to project and portray falsely as a Russian agent, but the whole time he was interacting with me for about a month or so in London, he was actually working on behalf of Western intelligence. So given that foundation, that corrupt foundation around my case, led to numerous other incredibly bizarre, strange meetings, encounters I had with other Western intelligence sources, because in my humble opinion, they were really after what I was doing in the Middle East, and possibly I was viewed as a threat to their certain goals and objectives of various governments, and that's why they wanted to really take me out.
Now, how long was the interview with the FBI?
It was about an hour and a half.
It was the only interview you had with them?
No. I had subsequent interviews, and I'll never forget my subsequent interview with them where they brought in the attorneys from the FBI to speak with me as well, and I told them, this person told me about emails, but it seemed that they weren't interested in him. Even during my first interview, my second interview, I was telling them, this man told me that the Russians have emails, and they didn't care. It seemed that they were just more interested in who did I tell on the campaign about emails, not actually more about the source. So it was very bizarre, and I guess that's how my entire case started off on the wrong foot.
Well, how many interviews did you do with the FBI?
I had 3 interviews initially, and then after my arrest at Dulles, I had, I think, 4 or 5 sessions with Mueller.
Okay, so you had three interviews just with the FBI. Were they recorded?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And the first interview was just with the 2 agents. The next one, they bring in the lawyers. Was it an intimidation thing? Did they steamroll you? Was it still, because the way they warm you up is it's all very friendly. Come on, we're just going to have a good chat. We're going to go talk. And there's no fear in it. So that's why you always read people say why they talk to the government. It's because it isn't like they kick down the door with the battering ram. They come on over, hey, let's have a conversation. Was it like that with the other 2 interviews?
I don't think, this is why I'm very happy I have this platform to actually finally explain this. I viewed the FBI as hostile to me about my ties to Israel, actually. And that's something probably no one in this room ever knew. But
what did they ask you specifically about Israel?
Basically, why do I know that diplomat? Why was I traveling there? Because,
can you name names of the specific people they asked you about?
For example, certain ministers. I don't want to actually disclose their names because I've dealt with them in the past under confidential terms. But I was looking at them and I was saying, what's wrong with what I'm doing? Because I used to work in the energy industry. So just so everybody understands what my background was and why I had these connections to Israel and in the Middle East in general, I was advising American energy companies doing business in Israel and helping both American interests and Israeli interests by making them energy independent and obviously helping our coffers back home. And I guess that wasn't viewed, favorably by certain elements of the Obama administration. And later on, I would find out that certain elements of the State Department were keeping tabs of what I was up to. And, it was basically a long microscope I had on me for years up until that meeting. And
so they had been following you. So you'd been under surveillance before you worked on the campaign.
That's my current understanding. Yes.
And that's because when I was reading all the charging documents and everything, I thought, because there's these 2 sort of conflicting narratives. One is, well, he was just a nobody staffer, didn't know anything. And then I read all the documents and they say, well, 1 month into the campaign, they were soliciting you. And I'm like, well, you have to pick a narrative. Either he's a nobody intern that nobody cares about, or there was something that indicated that they should look into you more. And that's what I always found perplexing.
Well, that's a great segue into the strange meetings. So
what's a strange meeting?
Let's go through this chronologically. I'm in London officially. At the time, I'm appointed a campaign advisor based on, and actually I had been in touch with Corey Lewandowski, I think from July of 2015. So
How did you get in touch with him?
Just sent him a message, and I said, I was working at the Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C. It's a think tank here, dealing with energy policy and the U.S. relationship with Israel and Egypt. I said, I'm tired of the establishment types. I loved my mentors there, Douglas Feith, Scooter Libby, great guys. They really helped my political trajectory, I guess. But I just felt that this wasn't what represented America at that moment, especially after 8 years of Obama. And they would tell me, because I said, I was 28 years old at the time, and I said, I want to join a campaign, and I want to leave Hudson. And I'm thinking about joining Trump. And they said, you're crazy. Like everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, back then, this is 2015, right. Okay? This is, now it's a whole different game, and they're all friends, and, But that was the general theme, that no scholar at a think tank or anybody in a mainstream outfit would be on the Trump campaign or even the Ben Carson campaign. I joined both. So I told, and then they said, you should join Ted Cruz or something like that, and we have connections. And I just wasn't interested. So I sent a message to Corey. I think their outfit was 3 people at the time. Mm-hmm. And he said, let's keep in touch. You have an interesting background. And we kept in touch. And then I joined the Ben Carson campaign. I left. I went back to London. And I reached out again for the last time. I said, am I going to join or not? So we've been talking for 8 months. And then I finally joined, and that's when things became very strange. Immediately. In London, actually.
Okay, let's define strange.
So I was working for this company that Simona as well was working for in London, named the London Center for International Law Practice.
Spying.
It's basically...
Cover up.
We now
to make
have,
a long story short.
We now, after myriad, independent journalists and people like yourself and others have looked into this place, they've understood that it's some sort of front for Western diplomats, ex-spooks, who just go in there and masquerade as scholars for some other reason. And I had no idea.
Next question, what we were doing there.
Yeah, well, and you get probably...
What were you doing there? How did you get there?
Because you were introduced by...
I was introduced by some political, the head of the socialist group at the European Parliament, introduced me to Mifsud, and he said, with your experiences, it's perfect to come and join our center. I never understood what I was doing. After 3 months,
So they found you?
Yeah.
Explain that. I always like to hear the concrete details, like they found me. Where were you? Were you having, taking a jog?
I was at a conference like that at the European Parliament, and Mifsud was there, and he was fishing for talents, like political experience, a little bit of connection. Young crowd, but already with a fit into the institution. And that was the crowd at the London Center. So he said, okay, your contract is about to expire. I have a great position for you in London. I love London. I said, yeah, let's move from Brussels to London. And then all the most shady things start to happen. Mifsud would take me to meetings with the sheikhs, talking about palaces in Dubai, and I said, what says to you with my expertise in European Union law? Or he was inviting me to another person to secret symposium in Tripoli, which, of course, it doesn't sound safe when you say, yeah, no, it's secret, you can't know what's going on, but you have to go and fight for human rights. So I didn't attend. You would never see the same person in the same room for 2 days.
So you travel in, you're flying discreetly, keeping a low profile?
Well, I simply...
With them, I mean.
Yeah, just Rome. I went to Rome, and I went to Brussels, but I didn't want to go to Tripoli. I was scared to death. They didn't want to tell me what it was about, and they wanted to send me in the Middle East all the time. So my experience with Mifsud is somebody who has ties with the Italian government at very high level, and wanted me to work in the Middle East. and I never understood why. And it was so shady. I remember the funny thing is the first time I did the interview for the job with his partner, I didn't know George, but he told me, oh, you know, a guy that is more or less your same background is now advising the campaign of Trump. Oh, you should meet him. And they started to talk about George so much. And when he reached out to me on LinkedIn, I said, oh, is that the guy?
And that's important because this is the organization that introduced me to MIFSID. Mm-hmm. And this is something that people, like you mentioned, the competing narratives and who Papadopoulos is and how does he fit into this. And so my meeting with Joseph Mifsud is the man who told me about emails that got me in trouble. Okay, just so everybody understands.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, because,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, so to set the table for this, because I guess not everyone knows, everybody who's been indicted, it's either a process crime.
Yeah.
So in his case, they claimed that he lied to the FBI. They said that he told him that when they talked about the emails, that conversation had happened a month earlier, and he was already on the campaign when he had talked about the emails and been approached about the emails. So the issue was they claimed that he lied to the FBI about that, and that hindered their investigation. And same thing with Flynn. It's what you call a process crime, obstruction of justice. And that's what they got him for. There's no Russian collusion or anything like that. And when you read the actual documents, it's always, like, where were you in 2015? Do you remember where you were in June versus July? I don't really know.
That's what.
Right, and that's why, yeah. Well, you were actually here. Well, they know better than you before they asked a question. So that's why they got him. The timeline is very important for that reason.
Basically, yeah. So I let this company know I'm leaving. I'm going back to Washington. I'm out of London because I was tired of London. I wanted to get back into the U.S. I was getting bored there, and I wanted to get back into politics here. And they said, before you go, you have to come with us to Rome. I said, why would you want me to go to Rome with you for a business trip as I'm leaving to go back to the U.S.? Anyway, I had never traveled to Rome. I thought it was a 3-day mini vacation on my way to see the Vatican and, you know, what's the fountain, the famous fountain called? Trevi Fountain.
Fontana di Trevi.
Yeah, so I get some good food. And the director of the company I was working for in London, which, as I said, now has been discovered to be something completely different than I thought it was, went to me and said, you need to meet this woman and in London, and she's going to explain a couple things to you. And I meet her, didn't stand out at all. She was mid-50s, just seemed like an academic. Later I find out she was the counsel for the FBI in the UK. Okay? Who also had from what I've read, I could be wrong, had also a personal connection to Mueller after 9/11. Okay, and this is March 2016.
In Rome, March 2016.
I met her in London where she was working for my company.
Right.
And she said, you should go to Rome.
Okay.
Why she came into my life to say that, I'll explain what happened. I then go to Rome to this university named Link Campus, okay? I thought it was a beautiful 17th century, you know, cathedral-style university that probably no one's ever heard of. I certainly never heard of it. Except when I walked in there, the rector of the university was the former Italian foreign minister. There was a symposium being held there with opposition leadership from Libya at the time, which was a divided country. And just you would see all these higher-ups in the policy and intelligence world. So I said, okay, this isn't a random university.
No, definitely not.
Now, after I've done my due diligence and I've looked into this place and probably others, we see that in 2004 the CIA held a symposium there. David Ignatius from the Washington Post wrote a brilliant article about it. FBI agents go there and teach courses. FBI, not Italian, FBI, American. So basically it's a spook school for Western intelligence. But I didn't know at the time because, you know, you're not supposed to know these things when you're being entrapped, basically. So my contact at the company in London told me, hey, this is somebody you need to meet, Joseph Mifsud. And he disappeared. And then that's when my company director disappeared, and Joseph Mifsud supposedly knew everything about me before I got in there. And he's like, so you're the Papadopoulos guy joining the Trump campaign? I said, yeah, who are you? I didn't know who he was. I know the Vietnamese prime minister, I know this guy, I know the State Department. I mean, he presented himself as a man of the world who could connect me to every country you could imagine, including Russia. And it wasn't a secret that Trump wanted some connection with Russia at the geopolitical level at that time. So I said, well, let me take him with a grain of salt and actually see what he can provide in terms of connecting the campaign to various diplomats, both Western and Russia, just like my job description entailed me to do. And he told me after meeting me in Rome that he was profiling me. What's your religion? Are you sympathetic to this party, to that country? It was more of a profile instead of a, hey, you're interesting and maybe we could work something out where I could help you and you can help me. It was more of a profile. But when you're 28 and you're not in these circles, you don't know what's happening until you look back, right? So he tells me...
Well, and you feel important, too. You're a young man meeting important people, right?
Well, you think they're important.
Right.
And that's... You think these are... But that's the point of intelligence. It's all fake. And sometimes you shouldn't believe everyone that you meet in those worlds. So I said to myself, okay, let's see what he can offer. I go back to my company in London as I'm transitioning back to Washington, and I speak to the director at the company in London, and he says, Mifsud is going to introduce you to the niece of Vladimir Putin. And I said, what? Within a week, I'm meeting the niece of Vladimir Putin. From a guy who's never been to Russia, never met a Russian official in his life, now the niece of the president of Russia wants to meet with me? Wow. I'm on cloud 9.
Right.
And, so basically that company was in on it, Mifsud, and there was some sort of game going on. I meet Mifsud and Putin's fake niece. Putin doesn't even have brothers and sisters, let alone that girl being his niece. So I don't know why he said niece. I could have, if I had just done a simple Google search instead of, And this girl, whoever she was, there are rumors that she's simply a wine store manager, or she's like...
Okay, so where'd you meet her at? Yeah, let's go. I like...
But then, other people, like my friend Dan Bongino, he says that she was Western intelligence, too, as part of an operation. So I don't know, because it's until the whole thing is declassified, I guess we'll never know who Putin's niece was.
Where did you meet her at?
So we met at a beautiful hotel with Mifsud. Mm-hmm. And, she barely spoke English, and this is very important for everyone to understand why things became very suspicious moving forward. Barely speaks English, smiling, not contributing anything to the conversation about Mifsud and I. Moving forward, she became whoever that person was I was talking to or writing to via email. She wrote in fluent English, became a so-called middle woman to the Kremlin and the world, and basically deflected Mifsud away, and she became some sort of person I was supposed to deal with. And I said, okay, and instead of dealing with the academic, now I'm dealing with Putin's family. Probably get me a little faster access, but that never happened. And this was why it became very strange, because she and Mifsud began to write to me that the Russians know about you, they want to meet you. The Russian ambassador in London can't wait to meet you, and I've set up the meeting. And at that time, I did want to meet with Russian officials, just to understand what the relationship was. It was probably naive on my part.
I mean, you wanted to build, that's the whole thing. Everything now is being reprogrammed in terms of where it was at the time. Nobody thought Russia was a thing. Nobody cared about Russia.
No.
When
Exactly.
during the debates, Obama ridiculed Romney. The 80s wants his foreign policy back.
Yeah.
But now suddenly everything is nefarious when it was just a thing. And you're building your network. You're a young man on the rise, a young man in a hurry.
That's exactly what it was. But then they never actually introduced me to any Russian officials. They just kept writing that we're going to do this. And then that's when I started to feel suspicious. And I remember I messaged whoever that person was, and I said, did I meet you in London? Are you the same person? No response. Mm-hmm. So I stopped talking to whoever that was. I started to distance myself from Joseph Mifsud at that point, and I believe he began to realize it, or whoever was running him began to notice that. And then he sent me a last email, as far as I can remember how it went down. And he said, I'm returning from Russia. Let's have one more meeting in London. I said, okay. And that's when he drops his bomb on me.
Okay.
Out of the blue, unsolicited. I had no idea what he wanted to talk to me about. It's as if I'm sitting here and then I'm telling you I have a kilo of drugs on me right now. No one's expecting it. But, you know, that's how... Yeah, the expensive kind. But that's how awkward and random and this info was that he just dropped on me. And recent revelations and discovery that has come out that I can't yet disclose how I know, or that there are transcripts of my meeting with this person. Now, if he was a Russian agent, why would the U.S. government have transcripts of this person dropping this fake information on my lap and basically seeing what I was going to do with it? So after that meeting, that's when things get even stranger.
But you had it, but I want to stop there for a moment because you had a pre-existing relationship with Mifsud before.
For about a month and a half. Yeah.
Okay, before you were working on the campaign.
No.
Okay, you met him after you began working the campaign.
So I met Mifsud in Rome for the first time ever. I guess 2 days after I joined the campaign, over a Skype call. But my name hadn't gone public, like everybody's name went public, I think, on March 21st. Mm-hmm. I think I met him in Rome around March 12 or 13. And
did he know that you were working the campaign?
Yeah, I think I told him I'm leaving, and so it's nice to meet you, but we're probably not going to talk because I'm leaving. Yeah. So after Mifsud drops this information on me, that's when London becomes a very strange city to me. That's when U.S. intelligence officials reach out to me from the embassy and start to question me and ask me.
Yeah, what does that look like, though? Because, you know, you lived it, and what we're trying to do is tell the story. And so reaching out to you, what does that mean? They're calling you. How does that go about?
Yeah. Oh, so let's backtrack. So the Mifsud meeting was April 26, 2016. I think 2 or 3 days later, the Times of London calls the company I was working for, and the Times of London is London's most powerful newspaper, and said, we want to interview Papadopoulos. And I said, that's fine. I talked to the campaign. They said, you should do it. I said, okay. Began to talk with them, and that's when that sensationalized headline came out about David. At the time, the UK Prime Minister was essentially disparaging candidate Trump, calling him an idiot, a moron, or for his proposal of a Muslim ban and other policy proposals that, whether the UK liked it or not, there was a lot of support for that in this country. And that's why President Trump, or candidate Trump, was talking about it. And then he changed, he modified things. But, you know, as a candidate, you just throw ideas out. Nevertheless, it's not another government's business, especially an ally, to publicly disparage a candidate for any idea. And basically, the Times of London asked me, do you think that he should apologize to candidate Trump? And I said something along the lines of, yes, he should. And the same night that happened, Piers Morgan calls me, I think at 11:59 p.m. He's like, did you read the headline in the Times? I said, what? Who are you? Piers Morgan, why are you calling me? You know, how did you get my number? And he's like, yeah, I need you on my show at 7 a.m. tomorrow. He has some show in England. And I looked at the title, and it said, Trump campaign advisor demands apology from the UK Prime Minister, or risk the special relationship, or something that was just like completely.
I call that your welcome to the jungle moment.
Welcome to that's welcome to the jungle.
Exactly.
Half the campaign hated me for it, half loved me for it. It was one of those kind of things. And so I said, I felt kind of good. I got a message, I think, from Hope Hicks, like, don't worry, you're cool about it. And I thought that meant Trump liked it, because Hope Hicks was dealing with Trump at the time 24 hours a day, I think. So I was, confident. But then after that interview, that's when I was being followed in London. I began to notice just people watching me that looked like, could be British intelligence, maybe CIA, trying to figure out what I'm doing. And 2 days after that, that's when the U.S. Embassy reached out to me. I think they were CIA. I think they were intelligence officials, either DIA, CIA, something like that. You never really know.
Right.
And I said, yeah, let's meet. I have no issue. I used to talk a lot with U.S. defense attachés and U.S. military personnel in the Middle East, in Athens, in Tel Aviv, in these kind of places. So I was quite comfortable. But this conversation started off on the wrong foot. They began to, one guy started talking Greek to me to kind of show that I know your background as a person who was dealing in Athens with our military people. And the other guy was like, I know your energy business activities, because I finished my thesis at Tufts on some pipeline. So those two were sent by somebody to basically probe me about my activities, personal activities, who I was hanging out with in London, who I was dating, very strange questions, and then wanted to ingratiate themselves within the campaign, which I found incredibly bizarre. And what do I mean by ingratiate themselves? They wined and dined me as if I was Marilyn Monroe or some model. I was
like
taking
your wife.
Well, she would have deserved it, yeah. But I just say, hey, if you want to spend $700 on wine and food, let's do it.
It was wine and dining.
Yeah.
This is like.
And they're just pouring drinks and this, and I said, it's quite a lot of money to be spending for two government workers. I mean, they're not poor, but they're not millionaires. And I've never spent $700 on a dinner myself, and I've never seen it, let alone somebody you just meet. And then I say, okay, I kind of want to distance myself now from these two guys. And they're like, no, please, we want to join the campaign, essentially. Mm-hmm. And I said, what do you mean join the campaign? You're active duty intelligence officials at the U.S. Embassy in London, and you're sending me messages that you want to ingratiate yourselves in the campaign, meet people and advise them and share knowledge. And I was just, a little cautious at that point.
Do you remember their names?
Yeah. It's Terrence Dudley. Mm-hmm. I think he's still at the embassy in London right now. Mm-hmm. And Gregory Baker.
Who wrote me a message 2 days ago on LinkedIn.
Who wrote you a message?
Gregory Baker. This is crazy. That's like he wanted to have an update about my job situation.
I guess they're still following us.
I forgot. It's like 2 days ago.
Give me a screen cap of that. Tweet a screen cap of that out if you still have it.
I didn't even know that.
I forgot to tell you because you were in prison. I could not say that.
Well, that's a good.
How did I only escape with 10 days of jail with all this going on in my life? So, by that point, I was tired of being wined and dined by these two guys, and, I didn't like that they were really interested in the campaign stuff. And they told me then, yeah, but you know what? You need to meet our people in Athens. Our people meaning, I assume, CIA guys. Mm-hmm. And I was like, why are they introducing me as a campaign advisor to their associates at the embassy in Athens? And, then I think there was an email where they accidentally copied me on, where they said this is a subject of interest or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I said, I hope that's not about me. Right. Because it couldn't be about me, could it? But it was probably. And so you had those guys. So so everybody's following. April 26th, I get this bomb dropped on me about emails. 2 days later, the Times of London comes into my life and we have this headline. 2 days after that, we have U.S. intelligence coming into my life. And 2 days after they left, that's when the Australian guy reaches out to me. And this is no random Australian diplomat, just so everybody understands.
We know now, yeah.
Yeah,
we didn't, yeah.
Now we know. And this is why it's my opinion that the investigation did not start on July 31st, as the current narrative states. I think the investigation began probably into at least the beginning of March, April 2016, possibly before. Mm-hmm. Because I had met Alexander Downer's assistant in London in April of 2016, around the time when Joseph Mifsud and all these strange characters are in my life. And she was quite hostile. She basically said that the Australian government is not pleased with candidate Trump. We're watching you very closely. He's a pariah. And I said to myself, first of all, why am I meeting an Australian diplomat? I mean, why are they reaching out to me? I have nothing to do with Australia. I don't think Trump ever mentioned the word Australia once during the 2016 campaign. But then later we find out that there's a Five Eyes intelligence, but I'll get to that, but one thing at a time. So she reaches out to me out of the blue in April of 2016, asking me questions about Trump, Russia, everything, and just being quite hostile. Then Joseph Mifsud drops his information on me. So I forgot that part. So first the Australian diplomat comes into my life.
Okay.
Then Joseph Mifsud drops the info on me, then the Times of London, then the US intelligence. And then after that, the same Australian diplomat who I had met with before said, hey, do you know my boss wants to meet you now? He's only...
And by the way, that's how easy it is to get caught up in obstruction of justice.
What's that?
Because your earlier timeline didn't match, and then you had to update.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah.
That's technically, that would be, you forget
scared.
one detail, and you get one date wrong, that's it.
That's
so
right, Mike.
Because I've been interviewed for 3 hours by the FBI. I'm scared still.
Yeah, I mean, she's been interviewed, she's been
They follow me at the
subpoenaed.
airport, all just to date George.
And explain that, because there's a lot of the personal element that we've never shared of what we've gone through since that first initial interview.
And that's what I want to hear.
And I think we can talk about these issues, but this is the stuff that no one knows about. And I think Simona could probably talk about that more than I can, because she's
terrified.
Yeah.
While the second trip I did to Chicago while we were dating, I come after flight from London to his home, and 2 hours later I have an FBI agent knocking his door, delivering me a subpoena from Mueller. I was shocked. I was shocked because
the day I pled guilty.
That was...
Right? Wasn't that the day I pled guilty?
That was, for the day you pled guilty in Washington. So I was with his mother at home. He was in Washington pleading guilty, and I was with the FBI agent telling me, you have no option. Either you go to Washington and just be interviewed by the grand jury, or you can come to the FBI headquarters in Chicago, and we have a friendly conversation, and if we are happy with you, we'll let you go.
Talk about trying to ruin my romance.
That was the second time I went to Chicago.
This is 4 months into dating.
I was dating. I mean, that's really something like they were telling me basically, don't ever come back to the United States. I think it's not a safe place. I must be a little crazy. I said like, okay, I called Mueller office in Washington, and this lawyer answered to me and said, we can tell you what's the interview about. But you can go to Chicago, meet the agent. So I go to Chicago. First, I contact the Italian embassy, which was not helpful at all. Like, no, we have lawyers, but you just go there, you're truthful.
Right.
I said, my boyfriend just, pled guilty for lying to the FBI because I misremember a date. I mean, I'm not very comfortable. So I just go there, and I have these two agents, and they start to make me the most incredible question about our personal intimacy, our personal life. They wanted to know if I was a sort of honeypot sent by Mifsud to spy on him, if he was spying too, if I was coming to the United States. They made a spy movie. And I remember I was like fascinated, and they said, but why are you so calm? Because I don't understand what's going on here. I'm processing. No, so it was really, and they asked me about Mifsud, but not that much, more about my connection to European Union, our meeting, why you're coming here, he's in trouble. So I shared all the information I had, and the next day they sent me an email telling me, we are happy with your interview, thank you very much, Mueller dropped off your subpoena. Good.
Okay.
That's okay. I was very happy. I was in the car with his uncle. I remember. I thought, okay, I got it. But after a while, like 10 days later, I was boarding to my flight from Chicago to Rome. And while I was boarding, the same two agents that interviewed me stopped me and told me, "Hi." And I was boarding in my flight, so I was terrified. I said, something happened. They don't want me to flee the country. And I said, no, no, no. This I never said to anybody, but they delivered me a secret number. And they told me, we want you to use this number to communicate with us every information you have about George. And everybody approach you in Europe. And they told me, are you planning to come back to the United States? I said, yes, we just got engaged. I said, oh, you're getting engaged in this situation? What is? And then they asked me also during the interview, when you are on the road, they asked me, do you love George Papadopoulos?
We have a very unconventional relationship.
I said, if they find out I don't love him, I go to jail. So better I play the role. That's true. No, I'm laughing about it, but I was terrified. I remember they told me a storm is about to come. Be careful. I said, what storm is about to come?
The FBI agents told you that.
Yeah, while I was boarding, saying like, don't come back, he's in trouble, leave him alone. And 1 week later, they unsealed his arrest. So that's the first time we see George in the news. Before I was going to Chicago, I knew everything was going on, but I didn't know, nobody knew that he had been arrested, that he pled guilty. So he was the first one to, it was really intimidating. Basically, the FBI coming to the airport was telling me, I know what you're doing, I know where you go, I know the time of your flight, I have an eye on you. And, do you love George Papadopoulos? It's like, okay. And then they asked me, do you want to marry George Papadopoulos? I said, he didn't propose yet, so maybe will.
Well, and that's the irony of how it's people like you who get caught up, because you don't know enough to be afraid of the FBI.
Exactly.
I'm terrified of the FBI. If I witnessed a crime and they said, I just want you to tell us what you witnessed, I'd be like, we're going to get to my lawyer, and then we'll, I'm not getting this pinned on me, kind of thing. It's a terrifying experience.
Because they act friendly, like, come here, just have a talk, and then it's, as you said, you end up in jail.
That's the mistake people make, is we need to be very, very conscientious and cautious before ever talking to them. Because, again, I read your stuff over and over and over again. I remember when it hit, the resistance is like, we finally got him, Trump, Russia. And a lot of the media, they play on people's ignorance. It's like, if you're a lawyer, you're like, oh, yeah, they got him on a process crime. If they wouldn't have gotten you on obstruction of justice, they would have, if you had anything about Russia, they'd have flipped you and they'd have worked their way up the food chain. So were they, after you pled guilty, you said you talked to Mueller's office 4 times?
Well, before I pled guilty.
Before you pled guilty, after, so you had the 3 interviews with the FBI's lawyers, and then you had 4 interviews with him. What were those like? Run us through those.
It's still an ongoing investigation, so I can't get into too many details yet, but this investigation seems to be winding down, so I'll probably be able to talk about it shortly. But just in general terms, it was just, contacts abroad, Logan Act violations, this infamous Logan Act from, I think, the 18th century. I said, what did I do? Whose policy am I undermining? By talking to an Egyptian diplomat or this guy or a Japanese diplomat. My experience, just, I guess the only thing I feel comfortable saying now is that I felt I was more under scrutiny for just helping Trump win than actually for anything nefarious I did against my country, if that makes sense. And, I hope maybe I just was reading things wrong, but I don't think I was. Because if even 10% of the narrative was right about me and my connections to Russia, just now, I think 2 weeks ago, a crazy person sent a letter to Schiff saying that I was dealing with Russian business and all this insanity. And I was, okay, I'm going to prison and this happens, and then I find out who it is, and it's just a crazy person who wrote a letter just to continue to fabricate this Russian...
No, they believe... No, that's not... They really... it blows my wife away because she lives with me. And we had a reporter... No, I had like a devil's bargain, like a reporter said, I think it's time to write the redemption piece on you. It's like, redemption? I don't need your guys' approval. I'm more popular than you. But he goes, but he said, you have to tell me everything about all the Russia stuff. And Sean is like, these people really believe it. No, they really, they believe it. And I know they do because in my house, I've had the New Yorker, Der Spiegel, the LA Times, Politico, and then they watch me work, and those people never, ever talk about the Russia stuff much anymore because they realize, like, oh, yeah, they're just like regular people. But a vast majority of journalists, and that really is kind of the dangerous part of it, is they're zealots, and they really do believe that Russia's controlling everything, and it's making them lose their minds.
But do you know what I found fascinating about kind of this fake narrative? The day before I testified behind closed doors for 7 hours on Capitol Hill, Joseph Mifsud's lawyer went public and said that Mifsud was working for the FBI. I'm not saying it. His lawyer is saying it. So after that, there were reports that Mifsud now wants to testify to the Senate. And if he testifies to the Senate, that would take a lot of gumption, to use a euphemism, for a Russian spy to go in front of the Senate and talk about his efforts to subvert democracy and hack emails and help Putin and Trump. So this is something, I guess this space, as they call it, is something that I'm really intrigued about, to see what Joseph Mifsud, if he does end up coming and testifying under oath to our Congress, and what he has to say. Because all that we know at this point is that there are transcripts, and that his lawyer is saying that when he was interacting with Papadopoulos, he was under the guidance of Western intelligence. So if that's the case, which I don't understand why his lawyers would be lying about him. I'm represented by some of the top lawyers in this country, and there was no way that they would go public and lie about me or create a fantasy around their client that doesn't exist for no reason whatsoever, because then they could get sued, and it's just not a good look for any lawyer to do that. So that's something that I'm very interested in seeing what happens, and my understanding is that there's an agreement, according to Mifsud's lawyer, that Mifsud has with the special counsel that he will speak freely once the investigation is over. So that's something I'm very intrigued to see what comes about.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. What's the one question you've never been asked that you've always wanted to be asked?
That's a good question.
How did I get so lucky to have her marry me in this?
How did you get so lucky to have you marry her?
Because sometimes the politics gets boring or redundant, and and I'm in the middle of it and I'm bored of it sometimes.
It gave me the best adventure of my life. Now people think we're crazy, but yeah. Less than 1 year, it feels like intense.
Well, I mean, it's still, the investigation's still rolling, but I don't know, 2 years ago I predicted what would happen and what did happen. I said you're going to catch a bunch of people in process crimes because people don't know that if you misremember the date. Because again, that's not the headline. George Papadopoulos misremembers the date by a month, right? When you actually read the legal documents and you're a lawyer as I am, you're just like, wait, this is what they had on him? Right? And then the general public's ignorant about sentencing, and they go, oh, well, he only got 2 weeks, so he must have given him a bunch of info. It's like, no, that's within guidelines, 0 to 6 months. Like, if you're a lawyer, you just look at what happened, you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of like just a whatever. This is people lie to the FBI every day, and you get 0 to 6 months usually, unless it's egregious. And then it gets spun into something crazy. So do you get a lot of death threats?
It's a funny story. So I started off as the darling of the left, when I couldn't defend myself, because then I had narratives created for me. So then every day, and look, I'm not saying,
No, I remember that. You were their patron saint. There's a new one every month.
I was the patron saint without ever uttering a word myself or ever going public about my story. I never understood that. So that for me was so frustrating to see that happening. I was like, my goodness, my entire life is crumbling before me to fit something that it's impossible to fit, because back to the original point, I've never met a Russian official in my life. So how am I involved in this? And that's where Spygate comes in. But as we were discussing earlier, and I don't know. What's your take on it exactly?
I remember that there were misinterpretation about George cooperating and being a patriot. They thought that this would lead to Trump impeachment.
Yeah.
I never said that, and he never meant that. And when I went on Fox News the first time, when he could not talk yet on Tucker Carlson, and I said, wait a minute, I want to set the record straight. This guy has been set up. I had all Twitter threatening me.
She was taking the
Yeah, let's
brunt.
talk about that. So what happened then that take us to that moment?
Yeah.
I remember we were in our studio where we were living in Chicago. We were just listening to people talking about George as the one who was talking to Mueller about Trump connection to Russia. And he said, I don't have any connection to Russia. They were trying to extort from George information that he didn't have. And the question was always the same. And they asked me, who George communicated in the campaign about the dirt on Hillary Clinton? Basically, they wanted to use him to find, and he never did it. So that's why Mueller was not happy with his cooperation. That's why I recommended the worst at his sentencing. I remember we were just spending our time, and Fox News invited me to talk because he could not talk, so I was his voice. And I said, no, this is not correct. I mean, this narrative has been distorted in a way to present a reality that it's not. And once I went vocal on the entrapment, on the Spygate, then I had basically half of America threatening me. Journalists from left, the same one that were writing beautiful article about me, slandering me, try to discredit me, but with reckless lies. Like, I'm a lawyer. No, she's not a lawyer. I am. It's not difficult to check this information even in Italy, or many other things like that. So I had these attacks that were very violent, and they were all oriented to undermine my credibility because they don't wanted me to prepare the field to what happened now today. Because now we can talk, and of course, better than me, can tell the story.
And there were the death threats too from Twitter?
Yes, I did. I had some. They said, Russian spy, pay attention, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
If I see you, I kill you.
I mean, this is the depth of insanity we've reached, where my wife is Italian, from Italy, born and raised. She just happens to be blonde and blue-eyed. But because of that,
I'm Russian.
They call her Russian just to fit another narrative that there's a Russian spy married to me. I mean, this is where...
They like it.
No, I read that. I thought she was Russian.
It's an interesting spy movie.
Yeah.
Many people think I'm Russian.
Before I looked into it, I thought she was Russian. No, that's why I read they're like, oh, he's married to this Russian. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting plot twist. I hadn't realized it.
But Italian.
Because what I've noticed is that when people in the media don't get death threats, it never gets supported. Has a journalist ever asked you about the death threats?
No.
No? Yeah. Never. No, they won't.
And
they won't.
Never. They say, oh, they're trolls. But actually, it's scary. The
I know, I
amount of
get
hate
it. Yeah.
I take every day. My account has been hacked at least 3 times. And I deactivated my account today, by the way.
Yeah.
Because I just I can't take it any longer. We'll be back maybe sometimes, but I won't miss it for the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's that's one thing you do notice is that there's all these articles about, if anybody on the left gets a mean tweet, it's a big story. But then when the left makes death threats on people, you'll never read that. You'll never read that in the media.
No, I have tough skin. I really do, and it's even for me. It's hard. I mean, but then thank goodness that we have patriots like people in this room and loving Americans who, not only, and this is something I must say, is kept us afloat financially through helping us with GoFundMe, until we were able to, work on other issues, other projects, morally, spiritually. I remember, I'll never forget this moment. The day I was going to prison, it was hectic day. You know, we got in a fight because of stress, and you could understand. I mean, it's a chaotic day, and any little thing happens, it's overblown. And you know, I was very upset and stressed, and she was crying, and I was yelling, and I was like, so this is how I'm going to prison. I'm going to prison with my wife crying and a fight. And I said, oh my goodness, this can't happen this way. However, as we were driving to the prison, a pastor from Houston, Texas, had no idea who this man was. He knew who I was, and he knew who Simona was, sent me a message, or somehow sent a message, I think on Twitter. Brother George, Sister Simona, can I pray for you? And I said, yes, of course. I mean, we weren't even sitting together in the car. We were just, there was so much just tension, you know. The moment that gentleman got on the phone and started praying for us, it naturally brought us together, you know.
Yes.
And yeah. And that's that moment. I mean, I tear, you know, just thinking of it, because I teared in the car. It was, God was in that car. God was with us, and it was basically a eulogy that, you know, the light comes after the darkest period, and I see it now. I actually wasn't even supposed to be at this conference, but by some miracle, I was able to get out of 2 days of my prison sentence, and I'm here speaking to everyone here. And that prayer brought us together, kissed my wife, and I held my head high, and I went into prison, into the unknown with courage and strength that just moments before I had none of. So that for me, you know, was one of the most beautiful moments of my life and my marriage with my wife.
Well, on that note, one last question for you first, and then you. What would you do differently if you could live your life differently?
What? Sorry, what?
If you could live your life over again, what would you change, if anything?
I don't have much regrets, because I never regret what I believe into. I always do what I believe into. So I make mistakes, as everybody. But I think even going back to this very difficult year, I would do it again and again, because in the end it brought me the love of my life. And
I think you have to
This
have
is
the
why I
same answer,
tweeted,
but-
I'm the luckiest man in the world, as I'm going to prison. I mean, who could say that? I can, and it's because of comments like that. And is that the same question to me? I'm like her. I don't regret. I love politics. It's what gets me going. I don't know, it's like an animal instinct that I just love it, and maybe that's why I had all this activity around me. But if I wouldn't go into politics, I'm a huge baseball fan. I loved playing baseball in high school. I probably wanted to play for the Chicago Cubs or something like that.
not bad.
So, but I don't regret my choice in politics, and I hope that this experience doesn't stunt me from progressing in politics, because I'm not the oldest guy in the world. I'm 31. You know, I've had some interesting experience, and I hope to continue into it.
Well, thank you. I hope you write about the first day in prison. I was reading it like a novel. So I hope you're keeping track of all of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
So I think it's over. Alex told me I had to wrap it up. So is that it? We're done? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Oh, that's all right.
You guys need to write a book.
She gave me a good idea how to be a supportive wife.
Oh my goodness.
I just wrote a book called Make Love Great Again.
Exactly.
And I do a podcast for that, and it's like we need more people that know how to be a supportive woman and a supportive man.
Yes.
You know, we have too many
why-
people that are
it's
selfish these
inspiring.
days. And
Exactly. That's I think why
Yes.
people think I'm a spy.
yeah,
Because it's so
because you're so
weird.
loyal.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
That's exactly what it is.
Exactly, and that's interesting idea.
Yeah. Thank you. I would love to get your guys' information at some point and do,
Oh,
do
yes.
you on my podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, George.
Move back this way.
I just want to say I'm going to put up
Thank you.
London for lunch.
We're going to move back. I lived in London for 4 years. Space. What's a bit more space back there?
Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you. Bye.
Contact me on Twitter. Sure. Twitter.
With you, both of you.
I got you.
So it feels like you were totally duped. Totally duped. I mean, that's what it sounds like. Everything. Like,
The whole thing is just
just kind of,
go. Let's go.
Oh, swipe up.
Oh yes, of course.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh,
Thank you, true. That's true love right there.
Thank you so much.
thank you, Gabrielle.
Thank you.
Problematic in that letter you're looking into about a business deal you're working on?
zero.
Thank you.
Earlier today, on his way to the Army-Navy football game in Philadelphia,